had been with Lucas Bennett for 8 years, from the days when he was unknown to the moment his name echoed across North Bridge. But the day before our engagement, I fell off a cliff. The doctors diagnosed me with permanent memory loss. In the hospital room, Lucas looked at me, my face blank and dazed, and chuckled. He casually yanked his driver over and said, "This is the man you've been with for 8 years. Since he's been driving for me for so long, I'll cover your medical expenses." As he turned to leave, the usually silent driver took off his sunglasses for the first time. He crouched slightly in front of me, gently held my hand and said softly, "Don't be afraid, I'll take you home." Later, as my condition worsened, Batman took on a job as a delivery truck driver just to pay for my treatment. But after my surgery succeeded, he got into an accident. I had no money to save him. I worked 3 jobs and even started frequenting high-end clubs, pouring drinks, singing, doing anything I could to earn more. Who would have thought that in one of those private VIP rooms, I'd run into Lucas again? He grabbed me by the wrist, pulling me up from the floor where I was kneeling to open a bottle. His eyes, bloodshot, carried disbelief. "Are you insane? He's just a driver. I'm the one you belong to." The sharp scent of disinfectant filled my nose. My head throbbed like it was about to split. When I opened my eyes, I saw Lucas Bennett standing by my bedside, frowning. "Doctor, she's awake." Seeing my confused expression, Lucas hesitated and looked at the doctor. The doctor immediately shook his head. "Mr. Bennett, when Miss Lynn fell from the cliff, her head suffered severe trauma. It's highly unlikely she'll regain her memories." Hearing their conversation only made me more confused. I looked around and realized I was in a hospital room. The man in front of me was Lucas Bennett, the same man I had stayed beside for 8 years. From obscurity to now, being the renowned CEO of the Bennett Corporation. But what shocked me most was that when Lucas heard the diagnosis, a flash of delighted disbelief crossed his eyes. "You mean she really can't remember anything?" "Yes." The doctor froze. "Mr. Bennett, please don't get too excited. If she returns to a familiar environment, there's still a chance she might recover her memory." Lucas narrowed his eyes and studied me. "So what you're saying is, as long as she doesn't go back to her old environment, she won't remember." What were they talking about? I hadn't lost my memory at all. I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. Nothing came out. Anxious, I reached out to grab Lucas, but to my surprise he stepped back, avoiding my hand. "Didn't she lose her memory?" he said. "Why can't she even speak?" The doctor quickly picked up the scans and examined me again. After checking, he frowned and said, "It's likely aphasia caused by brain trauma. With proper treatment, her speech should gradually return." Hearing that, Lucas lost all patience. "So she's awake, aware, nothing serious then. Don't waste my time." Just then, his driver entered with someone else and respectfully handed Lucas a set of car keys. "Mr. Bennett, Ms. Lancaster has arrived." A gentle breeze carried in a delicate fragrance as a stunning woman stepped into the room. Vivian Lancaster, Lucas's secretary. She had only been transferred to his side in the past few years. Rumor had it she was a wealthy heiress returning from overseas, a capable businesswoman. But outside the office, her relationship with Lucas was highly ambiguous. The last few arguments I had with Lucas were all because of her. Seeing her now, I couldn't help but clench my fists. Vivian glanced at my pale face and simply gave a soft laugh. Then she blatantly wrapped her arm around Lucas's. "If you don't leave now, Mr. Bennett, you'll be late for Mr. Bennett Sr.'s birthday banquet." Looking at my confused expression, something seemed to click in Lucas's mind. He leaned over and whispered something to his driver, then suddenly pushed the man toward my bedside. "Zach Simmons has been with you for 8 years. After everything that's happened, he's yours now. I'll give you a few days off, take good care of her." With that, Lucas tossed a check on the table, then casually wrapped his arm around Vivian Lancaster's waist, and walked out without even glancing back. Staring at the absurd scene in front of me, I froze in disbelief. Then my gaze slowly shifted to the man who had just been pushed toward my bedside. I recognized him. He was Lucas Bennett's personal driver, Zach Simmons. We usually just called him Zach. He always wore sunglasses and rarely spoke. Other than driving people for Lucas, he'd barely said a word. I never imagined that, after assuming I had lost my memory, Lucas's first instinct would be to deny our relationship completely and shove his driver into my life as a replacement. I had been with him for 8 years. Even a dog would have formed some attachment by now. I remember when we first arrived in Northbridge, both Lucas and I were dirt poor. We lived in a damp, freezing basement. In winter, we couldn't even afford to turn on the space heater. So the two of us would curl up on a tiny twin bed, sharing body warmth to survive the cold. The year we were the most broke, we survived on nothing but instant noodles for an entire month. Even after things improved a little, our birthday celebrations were just cheap $10 hot pot buffet. Life was hard, but even when he had only $20 in his pocket, he would give me 19. But 8 years later, the man who once huddled under a blanket warming my feet had changed beyond recognition. As his business started taking off, he became so busy that I barely saw him each month. He never told anyone about my existence. A month ago, when I pressured him again about getting married, he seemed worried I'd make a scene. Only then did he reluctantly agree to prepare a small engagement banquet. Vivian arranged the engagement party in a run-down mountain lodge on the outskirts of town. I clearly remembered that I fell off the cliff while inspecting that venue. A sudden warmth on my fingertips pulled me back to the present. I realized that my hand, cold from the Ford drip, was now gently held by a pair of warm hands. I looked up and saw Zach had crouched quietly at my bedside. I pulled my hand back in silence, fingers reflexively gripping the edge of the blanket. My lips parted, but it felt like something was stuck in my throat. I had 1,000 things I wanted to say, yet not a single word came out. Those memories weren't anything precious. Why would I want them back? Just then a knock came at the door. I looked up. Vivian Lancaster stepped in again, holding a shopping bag. "How are you feeling, Miss Lynn? Still don't remember anything?" Seeing my blank expression, she smirked. Vivian Lancaster curled her lips into a smile as she placed the shopping bag on my bed. "In the end, it was because you were helping decorate for my and Lucas's engagement party that you slipped and fell. I really couldn't bear to see that happen. That's why, when I found out that you lost your phone, I left the banquet just to buy you the latest model. That was supposed to be my engagement banquet with Lucas." "Since when did it become hers?" Seeing the flicker of shock in my eyes, she smiled sweetly and reached out to pat my hand. "Oh, and Lucas said that when we get married, he wants to invite you to the wedding too, Miss Lynn. So take care of yourself and make sure you attend, okay?" She emphasized the last few words with a mocking sweetness. Then she pulled her hand back and stood up. "Lucas is still waiting downstairs. I came all the way here just for you, Miss Lynn. You should accept this little gesture of mine." With that, she turned on her heel and walked out, heels tapping confidently against the floor. The moment the door shut behind her, I felt as if a blade had sliced straight through my chest. "Lucas Bennett, you're ruthless." Not only had he promoted Vivian while I was lying in a hospital bed with amnesia, but he even had her show up in person to rub it in. Seeing me stunned and motionless, Zach silently opened the phone's packaging for me. It was brand new, no SIM card, nothing saved inside. Even the photo gallery was completely empty. I stared at the blank screen. In that moment I felt completely hollow. 8 whole years of memories gone just like that. And then suddenly I understood. I closed my eyes and took a long, deep breath. 8 years is not short. If facing life and death could finally allow me to see someone's true colors, then so be it. "Lucas Bennett, from this day forward, you and I go our separate ways." A few days later, I was discharged from the hospital. But since Lucas and I had been living together, I couldn't go back to that apartment. Without hesitation, Zach took me straight to his place, clearly following Lucas's instructions. Zach lived in an old residential building. He supported me carefully as we climbed to the third floor. Then he opened a worn iron door and led me inside. It was a small 2-bedroom apartment. Though old, it was clean and tidy, compared to my previous place, where I lived alone day after day. This place actually felt more like a real home. But it struck me as strange. He had been working for Lucas for years. Surely he earned enough. Why was he still living here? Zach crouched down to change my shoes while my gaze drifted to a photo on the shoe cabinet. It showed a gentle-looking woman sitting by the sea, holding a bouquet of flowers and smiling brightly. "That's my mom," Zach said softly. "I told you before, her stroke wasn't the real issue. The cancer had already spread. She passed away last year." I froze, my chest tightening with guilt. I looked up at him in alarm, but he just patted my head lightly. "It's okay. She passed in her sleep. Before she left, I took her traveling to a lot of places. No regrets." He smiled faintly. "When she was still alive, she always worried that I didn't eat properly. But now that you're here, she won't have to worry about that anymore." "Oh right. The doctor said you need to rebuild your strength. What do you want to eat? I'll go buy groceries and cook for you." When I didn't answer, still dazed, Zach tapped his forehead. "But, hold on." He grabbed a sticky note and pen from the top of the fridge. "From now on, just write down anything you want to eat or anything else you need. I'll take care of it." I took the pen and wrote, braised fish, mopo tofu, spicy diced chicken. Zach looked at the note and chuckled. "Braised fish, sure. But the tofu's got to be done with scallions and the chicken has to be cooked with soy sauce. Otherwise, your poor little brain stitches won't survive it." I stared at him and nodded instinctively, obediently. Zach was a great cook, better than I expected. And he turned out to be more talkative than I thought too. As we sat at the dinner table under the warm light, he told me funny stories from his childhood, about the little adventures he had with his mom. I listened quietly, eating my meal, and for a moment I had the strangest feeling, like we really had spent 8 years together. Like this little place was really my home. Lucas Bennett was ruthless. He had all my personal documents and belongings packed up and sent directly to Zach Simmons's apartment. While I was still in the hospital, Zach must have spent quite a bit of time preparing. He even gave me the only bedroom with an ensuite bathroom, carefully arranging all my things inside. One day, while cleaning, I accidentally found a photo tucked away on top of the wardrobe. It was of his mother. That's when I realized the room I was staying in had once belonged to her. I couldn't help but wonder, what exactly had Lucas told Zach to make him so willing to take me in? Willing enough to even give up his mother's room. Lucas had said he was giving Zach a long vacation. But when Zach later tried to return to his position as Lucas's driver, he was told he'd been fired. The reason? Lucas claimed Zach was too distracted with taking care of me and wasn't doing his job properly, so he was going to replace him. Sounded absurd. Lucas had pawned me off on Zach, lying that Zach was actually my boyfriend. And when Zach took meticulous care of me, Lucas blamed him for not being focused at work. I didn't want to drag Zach into this mess any further, so I planned to confront Lucas and return to my old apartment. But that night, I accidentally overheard Zach talking to Lucas on the balcony. "Mr. Bennett, Miss Lynn's condition has worsened. I gave you $100,000 a month ago, didn't I?" Lucas replied coldly. "She just hit her head. How bad could it be? That should have been more than enough to cover her last surgery. The doctors say the trauma to her brain is now affecting her spinal nerves. She needs immediate surgery. If she doesn't get it soon, she could be paralyzed. I already told you, just keep her there for 1 month. Once I'm engaged to Vivian, do whatever you want with her. Kick her out. Dump her. I don't care. And you won't need to pay a cent." There was a pause. Zach's voice grew colder. "Miss Lynn has been with you for so many years. Even if she didn't earn you anything, she sacrificed a lot." But Lucas cut him off sharply. "Who do you think you are, Zach, giving me orders now? Don't forget you're just my driver. If you want hush money, fine. I'll pay you to keep your mouth shut. But take the cash and get the hell out of my life. And as for her, I don't want to hear another word about that woman. She drops dead out there, so much the better. From the other end came Vivian's voice. Sweet and coaxing. Lucas, come on. Zach's not that kind of person. Maybe there really is some special circumstance. What special circumstance? Lucas snapped. You think he actually fell for her? What a joke. The call abruptly ended. Silence blanketed the balcony for a long time. I clenched my fists and quietly returned to my room. No wonder Zach had looked so off when he accompanied me to my checkup a few days ago. He didn't want me to worry, so he told me everything was fine. But the truth was that my condition hadn't improved at all. In fact, I was suffering from complications due to the concussion. Zach never brought up that phone call. Never mentioned any of it to me. Instead, over dinner that evening, he hesitated for a long time, before gently telling me I would need another surgery in 2 weeks. He spoke calmly, assuring me the procedure wasn't too risky, and would help address the side effects I was experiencing. But the entire time he didn't say a word about the cost. I shook my head and scribbled a few words on a piece of paper. Too expensive. I don't want the surgery. Zach paused for a moment, then casually ladled some soup into my bowl. You don't need to worry about money. I've worked as Mr. Bennett's driver for years. I've saved plenty. You just focus on getting better. I stared at him, unsure of what to say. Because of his mother's cancer, he probably hadn't been able to save much over the years. And now, he was shouldering the burden of caring for me. A ticking time bomb that Lucas had dumped on him. For years, I had been picking up odd jobs to support Lucas. And when his business finally took off, he forbade me from working, and insisted I just use his credit card. So I didn't have any savings either. Judging by the way Lucas acted last night, he clearly had no intention of helping me. He wanted me to disappear on my own. But really, when I thought about it, why was any of this Zach's responsibility at all? Why should he be the one to carry the burden of my failed life? I wrote a few more words on the paper and handed it to him. Zach Simmons, were we really together for 8 years? There were no shortcuts when it came to studying. Zach, having taken the exam himself, understood this well. Sometimes he would help explain problems to me. But as the surgery date approached, aside from the 200,000 yuan transferred into my medical account, Zach was nowhere to be seen. I messaged him asking where he was. He replied that he had taken a short-term, long-haul trucking job and would be on the road most of the time. After all, because of me, he had lost his job with Lucas Bennett. It was already lucky that he'd found something stable so quickly. I didn't want to make things harder for him, but the job seemed to be truly demanding. So much so that on the day of the surgery, he didn't even get the chance to speak with me. The doctor reassured me not to worry. The surgical plan had been discussed in detail with Zach in advance, and he had specifically asked them to take good care of me. It was only then I realized how much Zach had been doing for me behind the scenes. The surgery was a complete success. Within a week, I was even able to speak again. I texted him the good news, and he didn't reply until after midnight. A week later, the doctor told me I was recovering well and could be discharged early. I immediately messaged Zach. The doctor said I can leave the day after tomorrow. This time he responded quickly. Great, I'll pick you up on discharge day. True to his nature, even if he was busy, Zach would never miss something as important as my discharge. He had arranged everything early. But when the day arrived, there was no sign of him. He'd mentioned before that sometimes his route took him through places with no signal. Was that what had happened this time? I couldn't shake the unease in my chest. As time passed, I grew more anxious and eventually called him. To my surprise, someone picked up almost instantly. But instead of Zach's voice, I heard an unfamiliar, urgent one. Is this Mr. Simmons' family? Please come to the emergency room at Central City Hospital immediately. Mr. Simmons' truck flipped over on his way back into the city early this morning. He's lost a lot of blood and is currently unconscious. The phone slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a loud clack. My head buzzed, then went blank. In the next second, I ripped out every needle from my arm and ran straight to the emergency room downstairs. When I saw Zach lying on the stretcher covered in blood, I nearly fainted. A nurse rushed over and caught me. "Don't pass out, are you his family? We need you to sign the consent forms. He doesn't have much time left." I'll sign. Only after they wheeled Zach into the operating room did I collapse to the floor. Around me I could still hear people whispering. That driver, so young but he pushed himself way too hard. Slept only 4 hours a day and worked non-stop. Even the healthiest body can't take that. Apparently, he took out a loan and was rushing to pay it back. They say it wasn't even his fault. He swerved to avoid a car crash and ended up flipping the truck. Poor guy, still so young. As their words drifted through the air, my nose stung. I couldn't stop the tears from falling. So that's why the surgery money suddenly showed up. That's why he only ever messaged me in the middle of the night to pay for my operation. He must not have rested properly in weeks. Today was supposed to be the day I got discharged. Zach had rushed back just to pick me up. Thankfully, the surgery had been successful, but the doctor gave me grim news. The damage to his brain was severe, and he might remain in a coma long term. I needed to prepare for the worst and start raising money fast. The equipment alone cost 3,000 yuan a day, and my savings couldn't even cover a full month. I sold everything I owned that had any value. Then I set up a thin mattress beside Zach's hospital bed. During the day, I worked part-time at a convenience store and a fast food joint near the hospital. At night, I went to an upscale club to sell drinks because the commission there was the highest. The lights at the club were harsh, and the music pounded so loudly my skull felt like it was splitting. But I didn't have the luxury to care. Dressed in a tight uniform dress, I knelt on the carpet of a VIP room, head down as I opened a bottle of wine for a customer. "Well, if it isn't Emily Lynn," a familiar female voice rang out from above. Froze. Slowly, I lifted my head and met Vivian Lancaster's mocking gaze. She was holding Lucas Bennett's arm, looking down at me like I was dirt. "I heard you've been working all over the place lately," she said, smirking. "What, Zach Simmons can't afford to take care of you?" She let out a snide laugh and nudged a wine bottle near me with the tip of her heel. The guests in the room burst into laughter. One of them deliberately poured wine on the floor in front of me. "Come on, clean it up. On your knees, if you do, I'll buy the bottle." Lucas didn't even glance at me. I bit down hard on my lip and reached for a napkin. But before I could touch the floor, a leather shoe stomped down on the back of my hand. "Who said you could use your hand? Lick it clean." The man grinned cruelly. My eyes burned with humiliation, but I still managed to squeeze out a smile. Just as I leaned forward, a furious voice boomed from behind me. "Get the hell out, all of you." The entire room fell silent. Even Vivian's face went pale. "Lucas, what are you doing?" she asked, but Lucas didn't answer. Instead, he picked up a bottle of wine worth 100,000 yuan from my tray and smashed it over the man's head. His blood-red eyes swept across the stunned guests. Terrified, everyone scrambled to leave. Within seconds, only Lucas and I were left in the room. I tried to stand up and leave too, but he grabbed my wrist and yanked me off the ground. I staggered but managed to stay upright. When I looked up, I was met with his burning, furious eyes. "Emily, do you really not remember who I am?" I lowered my head respectfully. "Of course I remember, Mr. Bennett. I fell off a cliff while decorating the engagement party for you and Ms. Lancaster. You paid my medical bills. Ms. Lancaster gave me a phone. I will never forget the kindness you both showed me." Seeing the woman who once clung to him now speaking with such humility and distance made something in Lucas's chest twist violently. He had wanted to get rid of her. He had already decided not to care anymore. Everything she was saying now should have benefited him. But hearing those words come from her mouth made his heart ache in a way he couldn't explain. His eyes turned red as he stared at me in disbelief. But before he could speak, I quickly added, But Zach has nothing to do with you. I'm only working this job to try and save his life. He took a trucking job to cover my surgery, got into an accident, and he's still lying in the hospital. Please, Mr. Bennett, just let me go this once. Zach is waiting for me. He needs me. The way I called him Zach so intimately over and over again made Lucas feel like a complete fool. He scoffed, eyes filled with bitter mockery. Let you go. Emily, he's just a driver. Have you really forgotten who the man is that you spent 8 years with? But even as he said the words, Lucas froze. He had never imagined that one day he would be desperate for her to acknowledge what they once had. He didn't know why, but knowing that the woman who once loved him so fiercely was now being cherished by his own driver, it tore something inside him. He wanted to scream, to destroy Zach Simmons with his own hands. Emily was his. What right did Zach have to steal her away? He was just a damn driver. What right did he have to make Emily kneel on the floor to serve drinks for the sake of saving him? You must be joking, Mr. Bennett, I said with a calm smile. Didn't you personally tell me that for the past 8 years I've only ever been with Zach Simmons? That you and I never had any connection? If that's true, then why don't we even have a single photo together? Not even one message. Lucas stiffened as if struck by lightning. No connection. That's right. After all this time, in order to fully cut ties with me, he had erased everything. Every photo, every message. He even told someone to throw away my broken phone. If something had happened to me, the police wouldn't have had any reason to contact him, because every trace of our relationship had been wiped out by his own hands. Seeing him like that, shocked and shaken, I felt nothing. My heart was quiet like still water. I gently pulled my wrist from his grip. Mr. Bennett, do you still need anything to drink? If not, I have work to do and should head to another room. I stepped back, gave him a deep bow, then picked up the remaining bottles from my tray, and turned to leave. But just as I opened the door, I heard his teeth grinding as he spat out, "Leave the drinks." I turned back, nodded respectfully, and placed all the bottles on the table. Then I knelt again and opened them one by one. "Thank you for your patronage." Lucas didn't say a word. His red eyes followed my every movement as I finished my task. Even when I got up and bowed again before leaving, he remained silent. The moment I stepped out of the room, I heard the violent sound of bottles shattering inside. I glanced sideways. He had swept every single bottle off the table, sending them crashing to the floor. Lucas sat slumped on the couch, gripping his hair in agony, completely consumed by helplessness. I didn't look back. I went to the manager, signed out the bill, picked up a fresh tray of drinks, and headed to the next private room. After a long night of work, I finally returned to the hospital. But Zach was gone. Panic surged through me. I immediately asked a nurse, but she told me that because of his rare blood type, Zach had been identified by long-lost relatives. They had come to the hospital earlier that day and taken him home. "Don't worry," she said. "That old gentleman is from a very prestigious family in Northbridge. Their medical resources are leagues above ours, all imported equipment. I heard they even flew in specialists from around the world for consultation the same day." "But I thought Zach's father passed away when he was young," I muttered. "He was raised by his mom." "Oh, and about the hospital bill," she added, seeing me pull out a card. "The old gentleman already said someone from his family would pay the rest. You don't need to worry." I shook my head. "It's not the same." In the end, I still left the card with her, then turned and walked out of the hospital. With Zach taken away and no way to reach him, I had no choice but to return to his apartment. That night, I searched the name of the old gentleman. Only then did I realize just how powerful the Jai family name was in Northbridge. The top trending news on every platform read, "Missing heir of the Jai family finally found." The family line continues. Jai patriarch brings grandson to pay respects at adoptive mother's grave. I clicked on the headline and saw Zach's photo next to that of the old man. They looked exactly alike. A perfect match, there was no doubt, he really was their grandson. As I stared at the screen, I finally let out a breath of relief. Thank God. Zach is safe now. Meanwhile, Lucas couldn't sleep after leaving the club. He tossed and turned until he found himself standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling window in his apartment. A half-burned cigar in hand, the ash slowly lengthening between his fingers. He looked down at the street below, at the two young figures walking side by side into the night. Suddenly, the curling ash reminded him of the 8 years he'd spent with Emily. Seemingly solid, but one touch, and it crumbled. He thought back to the respectful bow she gave him in that private room, and his chest tightened. He crushed the cigar between his fingers. The sparks seared his skin, but he couldn't tell which hurt more, the sting on his hand or the dull ache in his chest. "You're still upset, aren't you?" Vivian said sweetly as she approached, a glass of red wine in hand. Her perfume was clawingly sweet as she leaned in close. Lucas glanced at her manicured nails and, without warning, remembered how Emily used to patch him up. Her hands always had a faint smell of instant noodles, grease stuck under her fingernails. Back then she always smiled and said it's okay. But now, when he smiled at others, that light in his eyes was gone. He brushed Vivian Lancaster aside and walked into the deepest part of his house, pulling out a yellowed photograph. In it, I was standing on tiptoes, helping him straighten his tie. That had been the day he started working at a big corporation, earning just 3,000 yuan a month. Now, 3,000 yuan wasn't even enough to buy a bottle of wine in his eyes. It was the only photo we had ever taken together. He had deleted all the digital versions, but somehow he had kept this one physical copy. Ash from his cigarette suddenly fell onto the photo. As he reached out to brush it off, he realized the burn had landed right on my face. In that moment, an inexplicable panic overtook him. It felt like the woman who once loved him, as if he were her whole world, was about to vanish from his life for good. He rubbed at the scorched corner again and again, but the burn wouldn't fade. A heaviness settled in his chest. He threw on a coat and rushed out the door. Vivian, still stunned, called after him. "Lucas, it's the middle of the night. Where are you going? Send me Zach Simmons' home address." Now, even though it was already late, Lucas sped through the night in search of me. But it was too late. No one knew that the very night he left the club, I had quietly packed my things, restored Zach's mother's room to how it used to be, placed her framed photo back in its proper spot, and rolled my suitcase out of his apartment. Zach and I had been brought together by fate, but that fate had now run its course. I couldn't stay any longer. Back when I was with Lucas, my entire life revolved around him. I never had my own direction, my own plans, and even when I stayed with Zach, he was the one taking care of everything. Now that I was on my own again, it was time to live my life on my terms. I rented a small apartment and quit the job at the club. During the day, I worked at a convenience store. At night, I studied for the college entrance exams. During that time, Lucas somehow got my number through the club and started harassing me constantly, begging to meet. I was so fed up I canceled the number and got a new one. But by doing that, I also lost contact with Zach. All I could do was occasionally catch glimpses of him in the news. I heard he'd woken up and had taken over the entire Jai family business in Northbridge. Every time he appeared in the media, it was alongside the Jai patriarch, attending business banquets, signing big deals. Ironically, Lucas's company had always depended on the Jai family's connections. When he saw that his former driver was now the head of the Jai empire, Lucas was furious. Social media blew up with headlines like Zach Jai and Lucas Bennett face off at business gala, and Jai versus Bennett sparks fly. Soon, Lucas's Wonga Group was exposed for financial mismanagement and embezzlement. As the business crumbled, stock prices plummeted and the company hovered on the edge of bankruptcy until it was acquired by the Jai family, saving only a sliver of its assets. Lucas himself ended up in prison for economic crimes, but none of that had anything to do with me anymore. I focused on earning money and studying. 3 years later, I completed my bachelor's degree in financial management and left the convenience store. I joined a finance company and soon began preparing for my master's. My goal was to study abroad after graduation, to explore international markets. I got accepted into my dream school. One day, while consulting with my professor about overseas finance programs, I bent down to pick up some documents. Just as a gust of wind blew through the open window, scattering my resume pages across the floor, I instinctively reached for them, only for a slender hand to catch them mid-air. My professor glanced past me. "Oh, here comes the busy man himself. Perfect timing, let me introduce you to your new junior." He smiled. "Emily, meet our top special admit from last year. Same research focuses you. You'll want to pick his brain often." I turned around and realized we were standing in a hospital corridor. A low, raspy voice brushed past my ear like rough silk. I looked up and met a pair of amber eyes. I had thought I'd never see Zach Simmons again in this life. But the moment I saw him, all the emotions I had tried to bury surged forward uncontrollably. Still I kept calm. Zach stared at me for a long time, so long the air itself felt frozen. I instinctively said hi. But before the words were fully out, I was suddenly pulled into a familiar, warm embrace. His voice trembled, choked with emotion. "You didn't leave an address again. I looked everywhere. Every place you might have gone. You once said if you had another chance, you'd try to get into this school. I waited a year. I thought I'd missed you again. But you really came." I stood frozen. I had only mentioned it once in passing, and he remembered. The ascent of Osmanthus in September drifted through the window. Papers fluttered through the air. Time rewound. We were once again back in that hospital corridor years ago. Only this time, the boy didn't just read the message in a paper crane. This time he caught it and came running after me. I stood there for a long while trying to process it all, before throwing my arms around him, eyes red with tears. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I made you wait too long. Thank you for your time, and that's the end of my story. Subscribe to not miss more videos like this. And remember, history is a chance to become a better person, and see you soon."